This is our amazing presentation with the Career Center, and Donnie's here who's going to speak a little bit later. This is planning for life post grad, and it's part of our series for Financial Literacy Month. So we're just so excited you're here, and we want to tell you a little bit more about the Financial Wellness Center and the resources that are available to you. Just before we get right into things. So, our mission at the Financial Wellness Center is to financially empower students with the knowledge needed to make sound financial decisions during and after college. We really focus on these big five areas of education, and it's just critical areas of holistic financial wellness. So, this includes earning, which can be like budgeting, spending, so managing the inflow and outflow of money, as well as borrowing. So that includes student loans, understanding credit and credit cards, protecting. So we talk about identity theft and fraud, and saving and investing, any strategies in investing 101. So what do we do? Obviously, y'all are at a financial education workshop. So we do those often on all those big five topics that I mentioned, but you can also join us for a one-on-one peer financial coaching session. I myself am a peer financial coach, and we have 20 awesome other coaches who are so willing and able to help you through all of those big five categories that I mentioned, and anything else dealing with, your financial wellness journey. We also do on-demand financial education workshops for student groups or organizations, as well as we love to build partnerships across campus to offer financial wellness enrichment opportunities to students. And here we are, planning financially for postgrad. So I'm gonna pass it off to Donnie. If you have any questions, make sure you're utilizing the chat.
All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Donnie Amtman, and I am the Assistant Director for Career Readiness at the Career Center, and I'm also a career coach, which means that I also meet with students one-on-one to talk about pretty much any sort of career-related questions or issues that students have. Okay. All right, well, thank you everybody for being here. So what I have done, first off, it was great to be asked by financial aid office, I want to say, but I know your peer group, to be invited here. And what I've done is, so at the Career Center, we have a team of 6 career coaches, and the primary work that we do is direct one-on-one work with students. And so that would be pretty much most of the things that all of you who shared out individually, questions and where you're at and sort of just tips and tricks. I'll be covering some of those today. But I do want to let you know that our team of coaches are available by appointment to pretty much talk about anything related to career, questions that you have wherever you're at in your journey, whether that be you've got a resume and you've worked on it a lot, but you're wondering how to tailor that to a specific opportunity, or how to write a cover letter. I think one of you had mentioned, the evaluating and negotiating jobs. So it's really that one-on-one help that we give to students. And I think something really important to share with you all and pass it on to your friends is that we meet with all students for a year after graduation, just as if you are a student. So what that means is we know that a lot of students, take some first steps. They're different. You're all in different parts of your journey when you graduate, and then things can change, and you might change your mind on industry or where you're going, or go to grad school, wherever you're at. You just reach out to us, and you can have appointments just like this, or coming into the center when we open up again. But we're just really here to support you at any stage in your journey, and that's up for a year after you graduate. So I do want you all to know that and to let everybody know, because once you graduate, sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm supposed to, know exactly where I'm supposed to go and have it all figured out, or whatever stories you have in your mind, right? But the reality is that we all need kind of coaching and help throughout our lives, usually in our career journeys as things change. So what I've done today is I have put together a few slides, PowerPoint slides, to talk about some kind of high-level tips, tricks. I don't know if they're tricks necessarily, but just some guidance on resume writing, on cover letter writing, what cover letters are, kind of how to structure them. I do talk some about interviewing and tips on interviewing and some resources that we have, and then some just general job search tips. So one thing I did realize when those of you who spoke up in the introduction, you're kind of in different places, right? So some of this may seem really basic to some of you. Some of it may be coming just in time, but I've purposely made it a bit high level so that I can cover different topics, but also you might find sort of basic to a little bit more advanced things, so that it kind of can answer any questions you may have. I prefer to have a pretty casual style in my workshops, and so what that means is that if you have questions, and one of the things, it's a little bit harder to do interactive workshops online. I haven't done that many while we're remote, so I'm sure there's other things I could build in, but this is mostly going to be information that I give, and the interactive part would be helpful. If you have questions on any of these things, feel free to unmute yourself and just put it out there, because I want this to be helpful for all of you where you're at. And so if I'm not covering something specific, just please jump in. I don't know if I have access to look at the chat. Yeah, I do. So if you have something and you want to put it in chat, you feel free to. It's really better for me if you just kind of unmute yourself and put it out there so that I'm not distracted with that chat feature, but whatever feels best to you. So with that, I'll go ahead and see if I can share my screen here. You all, perfect. Okay, so ground rules again, just unmute yourself, please, and jump in if you have questions. So mostly, I call this post-grad job search tips, but this is for while you're in school too. And you've got my contact information here. So this is my email address. My name is Donnie, and my phone number. And please feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. I can usually answer some things over email or say, hey, this is better to just kind of make an appointment with myself or one of our coaches. And just to give you a little bit of background on me, I have been working at the UO Career Center for I think about 14 years now, mostly and primarily as a career counselor, career coach, and now I'm leading our team of career coaches, and they're all fantastic. They are here to help students, passionate about helping students, and really knowledgeable about the world of careers. So we have on our website, which is career.uoregon.edu, links on how to make an appointment with one of us. One kind of cool thing that we also offer on top of one-on-one appointments is virtual document reviews. So if you have a resume or a cover letter, personal statement for graduate school, you can make an appointment and we'll do that online, give you some tips through email. So that's another service that we offer too. So starting off, I want to just talk about, again, this is sort of high level, resumes and cover letters. Resumes and cover letters are still pretty traditional job search tools, and the resume, these are often given together through online applications. The resume is really meant to be kind of a broad overview of who you are and what you have to offer, specifically as related to the job or internship or experience that you're applying to. Typically 1 to 2 pages long, is meant to be skimmable. Some data that I've seen over the years is that some people spend like an average of 6 seconds looking at the resume, right? So you want to have things pop out. How can you have what it is that you're looking for pop out, have formatting be clean, in a way to get across the essence of what it is you're trying to look at. And then a cover letter is, it's a narrative, right? It's a letter that you're writing, and this tends to be focused and specifically. I would say there's no such thing as a general cover letter. So this is written exactly, specifically for an audience that you're targeting. Almost always 1 page, paragraph format, 3 to 5 paragraphs, and it helps to connect the dots between the experiences that you have to offer and the position that you're targeting. So kind of just high level overview there. So here's just, talking a little bit more about the resume, it's not meant to be comprehensive. So sometimes students think, okay, I've got all this stuff that I have in my background, and especially things that you've worked really hard at and you're very proud of. Sometimes we have this instinct to put everything on that resume, but it's really meant to be a document that you tailor to a specific experience. And by what we mean by that is you want to make sure that you're looking at the job posting and considering, of all the things in your background, what is the most applicable to where it is you're heading. And so I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the term called transferable skills, but that's basically looking at, I see some head nods there, skills that are transferable from one experience to another. And some of them that we are very familiar with now with employers are looking for pretty general or some specific general transferable skills, like the ability to communicate with people, both in writing and in talking, working in teams. So think about, students have team projects that you might have in your classes, the ability to actually meet with a team and get a project done. Whether you've met in a team and functioned in a team and done a project in a class context, that could be a skill that is considered transferable into a different context, like you've worked in teams. And so it's trying to think about what experiences in your past can be transferred that will be applicable to where you're going. Almost feel like this could be kind of confusing how I'm explaining it right now, but hopefully some of this is coming through. But thinking about those broad skills that you have, if you've analyzed something in a history paper that you've written, or a business class where you've analyzed a business case scenario, those are skills that you have that employers are looking for. And so the trick is, how do you convey that on paper? And there are skills to do this and ways that a couple that I'll be teaching here. But another reason to kind of work with a coach to say, okay, here's what I've got in my background. How can I make it very specific resume for a specific opportunity that you're trying to land? So a little bit more on kind of high level resume there. There are different types of resumes. There's something called a master resume, which is something I'm a fan of, that I would encourage most students to have. And that is actually a very long, sometimes multi-page document with all the things you've ever done on it that you think might be resume material. And so it's kind of almost a place to cut and paste to make what's called a tailored resume. And that is the one where you say, here are the experiences from my past that exhibit the skills I'm looking to convey, and I'm going to choose those to put on a tailored resume. And so as you're applying for different jobs, while you're in school, after graduation, you may have 4 or 5 different versions of your resume that are tailored to different positions. So it really comes back to, what are you looking to do? Where are you wanting to work? And what experience are you wanting to gain? And how can you tailor the experiences that you have to the different audiences out there? And then another one is a CV, or a curriculum vitae, which is typically used if you're targeting academic jobs. And sometimes if you are applying internationally, sometimes people will call a resume type document a curriculum vitae. But I just wanted to cover those different types of resumes for different strategies that you would use. So I think of the years that I've worked with students, there are often questions about resumes. Some are, should I include an objective or not? I heard it has to be 1 page. And so how do I fit everything I need on there? and just questions that I'm sure some of you, and again, pop in if you have some of these. A lot of the questions I get from students as you're grappling with, how do I put myself on paper effectively, and how do I know the rules around what I'm supposed to do and not supposed to do, given what I would say is a bunch of opinions about resumes that are out there. And so I've come up with this unofficial 3 rules for resume writing that I've just collected over the years, because these are the things that I would say hold true across all versions of resumes. So the first one is a professional looking. And by this, I mean, if I was in a room with you and I held up a resume, I could say, does this resume look professional? And if you thought it looked professional, you'd nod, and we'd probably all be in agreement. There are many ways that a document can look professional, but they usually have formatting that's consistent. It's got use of margins, maybe bolding, but it's you look at something, you think that looks neat, right? As far as orderly. And again, it can look a lot of different ways. The second one is being free of spelling and grammar errors. And this is pretty much a no-brainer, but you want to make sure that your spelling, your formatting is consistent. And this is where having somebody else look at it, a coach, a friend, because we're working so much with our resumes and have just been so used to looking at them that we're going to miss things. I could probably show you a version of my resume and you're going to see something that I don't see, right? So this is perfect for one of your friends who's really detail oriented, excuse me, and not relying necessarily on spell check. So is it professional looking, free from spelling and grammar errors, and then this one that you won't usually see written anywhere, but the resumes typically don't have first person I and me. Those can be used in cover letters. So beyond those 3 general rules, you have a lot of creativity. So for instance, does it have to be 1 page? It depends. Who's your audience? Are you potentially cutting your candidacy for something if you just put all of your information onto 1 page and you maybe don't put some experiences that could help a potential employer see some skills that you have that are really helpful? Another question is sometimes like, oh, I've heard I shouldn't put anything from high school on my resume. Well, let's dig into that. Do you have experience from high school that shows maybe longevity and a skill building over time in a particular area? That might be a case for including something in high school. So beyond these 3 things, I would say everything else is an opinion. And what's important is to ask the why behind it. And so that's, again, another plug for career coaches on campus. We can help with those specific questions that you'll have. I'd like to open it up just real quickly right now. If anybody has one of those questions, like I've just been wondering about this, about resumes, this would be a good time to ask. Something specific about yours, something you've heard maybe and are just wondering about.
I actually just recently had some like what I would think are kind of like conflicting pieces of advice. I'm wondering what you think about tenses and if all of your bullets or all of your things should be in past tense, or if you are in a current position, those should be in present.
Mhm. Yeah, so this is, I will give you my opinion, right? um, um, and what I've seen typically is if you did it in the past, put all those in past tense. If you're there now, it just always sort of felt awkward to me to put something in the past tense when I'm still doing it. Typically within experiences, so let's say in the past you worked at an ice cream shop, everything should be in past tense there. Where I would say you run into just issues as if you have, just for lack of detail, attention to detail, some of those things in the past, some in the present. So I don't think that that's going to cost you, getting an interview somewhere, but having those tenses, it really just shows attention to detail. But I think having conflicting tenses from if you're somewhere present and then past for past things, that's something that I've run across a lot. So for resume sections, there are what I would say 3 required sections, and the rest are totally optional. You need to have your contact information on there somewhere. Some people ask, do we still need to put, our street addresses on there? It's pretty common for people to just put names and cell phone numbers now. Again, there's no right or wrong here, but you have to have some place for a person to know how to get a hold of you and what your name is. You want to put your education on there. Technically, you only need to put places where you will be getting a degree. If you have a transfer degree from a from a community college, you can put that on there. I'm somebody who went to 5 different schools before I graduated. I just put where I graduated. So it's just where you intend to graduate from. And then an experience section, which can be 1 or more. The rest of these that you'll see on the right-hand side, there would be places and times to use them, an objective or a summary. Some people will say, you've got to have them. Some employers I've talked to, there's no consensus. But if you have one of them on there, just make sure that everything on your resume is intentional. Course highlights can be helpful if you have a specific course that you've taken that has to do specifically for where you're applying to. That could be helpful to highlight. Honors and awards, community service, a skills section, that can be particularly helpful if you have some very concrete skills that you're trying to highlight, let's say advanced CPR, and that is something that will be used in the job that you're applying to. One thing that I think is a strategy that I have found helpful is you're in a situation where, let's say you've had an internship. But right now you're working at an ice cream store. I think I have ice cream on my mind, just to use an example. So right now I'm working at an ice cream store, but 2 summers ago or last summer, I had an internship at a PR firm. And what I really like to do is start going to marketing and public relations. Usually the information on your resume should be your most recent position back in time. So if I have an experience section, the very first thing, most recent, would be the ice cream store. But what I really want the first thing for the person I'm writing my resume to be is that PR internship that I went to. So one strategy I'm a fan of is putting a relevant experience section, and under there I can put the PR internship I had, maybe a marketing project I did in a business class, and I can outline that. And then under that I put an other experience, and that's where I put my ice cream or other experiences that show some of the skills, like customer service skills, that I'm trying to convey. So that's a way of moving related information higher up on your resume, while also putting other things that you want them to know about, but is not the very first thing. So that relevant experience, you could even title it public relations experience and put in there clubs that you're part of, those internships or volunteer positions and class projects. So just mostly highlighting on this part that there's a lot of creativity in resume writing, with the objective being, how do you strategically package yourself or brand yourself from your experience in a creative way that somebody reading it will say, I want to interview this person because they have the skills or some of the skills that I'm looking. I'm hoping this is helpful for you, learning a few things that you haven't before. All right, so on resumes, typically you'll have your experience section, and then most people will put a bulleted list of tasks that they've done or some description of what they've done. Some people will write a paragraph. I usually suggest using bullet points, because the eye goes right to the bullet points. And for that, we have a formula of sorts on how to write. So what I would say is probably the most difficult part of resume writing is how to put the things that you've done in an experience you've had, volunteering, internships, past jobs, again, class projects that you've done. How do you take that experience and articulate it in a way that gets across what you've done? And so this formula is choosing an action verb, following it by the subject of what you've done, and then some outcome or clarification. And so I've given you a sample here. Conducted, so starts off with an action verb. And we have a handout that I can send to Gilbert to send out to people, or maybe even post on your website with a bunch of verbs on it, which is one of my favorite sheets. So an action verb: conducted. What did you conduct? Evaluations on 35 plus first grade students. So that's the subject, the who or what you did. And then the outcome, or why did you do it? To establish a treatment plan and goals. So that particular formula, action verb plus who or what plus outcome or results, it can be a really good framework on how to start articulating what you've done. You're starting off with a powerful verb. You've got my attention: conducted, researched, communicated, evaluated, whatever. There's lots of different ways that you can articulate something. And then you're being specific on what it is, and then you get to craft the outcome to show what it is that you want to convey to your reader. Just by a quick show of hands, if your video is on, how many of you kind of have either learned this or naturally use this type of wording on your resumes? This again is really tricky for most people, and it is what we are really good at helping with at the Career Center, is that how do you get yourself on paper? And so we will walk through how to do this with your particular experiences. All right, well that was, let me just go back up here, the end of resume sections. Any quick questions? They don't have to be quick, but any sort of lingering, hey, I was hoping you'd cover this, that I can. So cover letters, these are, this is a place where you get to do two things. One is write about specific experiences from your past in a letter format that also acts as a writing sample. And so this is something that would be given with your resume. And so it's the cover letter's name came from is it covers the resume, and that this is the narrative part that people will read first. There are typically 3 to 5 paragraphs, usually with the exception of an academic job would always be 1 page, and they're always tailored to where you are writing. And so in this part of the workshop, we just want to cover what are the components of a cover letter. So they'll always have some sort of introductory paragraph. And this is where you typically will write, you're introducing yourself, but this is usually like, why are you interested in this job or experience? Maybe introducing you in some capacity, like what you're studying or where you are, and something that gets at why this particular experience in particular. If you know somebody in an organization who's a contact, this would be the place where you would put that person's name as a reference or a referral if you have their permission. But it's really, this is the part that you want to write specifically to each organization. And the point of this is to kind of get the reader's attention. What is it specifically about that experience that is having you, want to apply and spend your time and energy there? So taking a little bit of time to tailor this is important. And students will sometimes say to me, I know I need to grab their attention. How do I do it? How do I craft the perfect first paragraph so I'll just pull them in and they'll be the perfect person? Super stressful. I can certainly relate to the desire for that, but the point, how you're going to grab someone's attention is honestly just by being yourself, is grappling with how do you articulate, what is it about that company, that organization, or that position that has you applying for it. So just kind of trying that would be your best start. It's a good place to put some of the high level skills. So let's say fluency in Spanish is a prerequisite for this job. You would want to put in that first paragraph, I'm fluent in Spanish, right? So maybe some breadcrumbs of a few skills that they're really looking for that you can pull them in with. The first, that's their first paragraph. The second paragraph or two is where you identify from a job posting or what you know about that position, 2 or 3 of the high-level skills that they're looking for, and you outline specifically that you have that. So for instance, I was going to make an ice cream example, but I will veer from that. Let's say they're looking for somebody who knows how to use Microsoft Excel. going to try to make this up off the top of my head, but one of your sentences in one of those middle paragraphs would be, I have a high proficiency in Microsoft Excel. During my statistics class, we often had to do some of our programs and some of our formulas in Excel, and I had the ability to build formulas within the application and run statistical reports. So I'm not just saying I know Excel, I'm saying the specific things in Excel that I know how to do, that I know that they want me to know how to do. So I'm bringing those to life. And so that's how kind of storytelling, you pick a few of those and you bring them to life by just showing how you've used the skills that they're looking for in their candidates. And then the last paragraph is really just the conclusion, and that's one I would say you could almost cut and paste through most of your cover letters. Definitely don't cut and paste like you want to make them, to that organization if you're using their name, but it would just be, thank you so much for your time. I'm really excited about this opportunity of potentially interviewing with you. And there's two ways to end this. One is just to say, I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. And another approach that some students like is, I will follow up with my application within the next week or two. And if that's the case, you better know that you know how to reach them, and then you better follow up. It's typically used a little bit less now these days with things being so automated, but you can have some sort of closing paragraph with how to reach you. So that's the general cover letter outline. We tend not to, years ago, we stopped giving out sample cover letters because what we noticed students were doing was just kind of taking out some of the specific language and popping in some of their own words, and it strips out the voice. That's really important to have come through. Quick cover letter outline. Anybody have any questions about cover letter writing? Again, this is just meant for real kind of orienting you, and then knowing that you can come and bring in your cover letters for feedback from us. Okay. So interviewing. Interviewing is really exciting and often nerve-wracking for most people. And one thing that I like to teach students, especially about interviewing, regardless of how much experience or no, if you've had no experience, is that interviewing is really a two-way street. That yes, you are in that exciting position of somebody calling you for a position that you're hopefully excited about, and asking you questions, and it can feel like you're the one on the hot seat, which in some ways you are, because they're asking you questions. But it's really, I think, really helpful to realize that you are a commodity, right? You are somebody who brings all of your education and your experience and your personality, and that you are interviewing them too, right? So a good job fit is one where somebody sees that you have skills that they need, and you see an experience that you want to contribute your time and energy for. So know that it is that you interviewing them, and seeing if this is a good fit for you, and there's some strategies around that I'll talk about, as well as them interviewing you. But sometimes it can just feel like a one-way street, and I like all students to know that there's you have some power in your position also. So I'll just cover some high-level tips here. The first most important thing is to do your prep, to make sure you're prepared. And that has to do with what I call knowing yourself, what drives you, being able to articulate why you're interested in this particular role, getting acquainted with what you bring to the table. And so that means studying your resume, making sure you know and can speak intelligently on the experiences that you have, because they'll likely be drawing from content from your resume and cover letter. So it's just grounding in your own self, your own motivations, your skills, and practicing articulating that out loud. And then doing your research on the organization. And this can be their website, LinkedIn profile, checking them on the internet and Googling them in the news. You'd hate to have something happen to an organization the day you're interviewing and not know that something was going on. So it's doing your due diligence, knowing the mission statement, and really kind of seeing what are the things about that organization that you're interested in. Understanding, making sure you know the job description inside and out and are able to articulate how you fit with them. So preparation is critical, and it does take some time. So make sure that you understand how to do that. I will say also with preparation are things like what do you wear? Like if you're going in for an interview, how to navigate if it's a virtual interview, which a lot of them are, especially right now, and will probably continue to be. How do you make sure you know some of the tips and tricks for Skype interviewing, which we can talk more about if you make an appointment. But those type of how do you make sure you're the best prepared you can be on multiple levels. Usually the most anxiety that I've heard from students are around the questions that they'll be asked. There is no one way, one list of questions that every interviewer asks and you know what to expect. So I think it's helpful to talk about the types of questions that you might be asked. They're predominantly what are called behavioral interview questions. And these are the ones that typically start with, tell me about a time when. Give me a situation when you had to handle X. They're things that tend to be hard to just think of off the fly. And it's about focusing. It's really based on this premise on if you can articulate how you've handled something in the past, that gives an indication to them of how you might handle it in the future. And so those are, before I interview, in the past, what I've done is I've just gone into Google and I've typed in behavioral interview questions, and you'll just see pages and pages come up, and it can be a good mental exercise of seeing what types of questions that may be thrown your way. Competency questions, and those are usually specifically around, let's say, that Excel question that somebody asked you about your competency and ways you've used specific skills. And then there are other questions that some of them are problem solving related. Sometimes it's becoming more common. Last time I talked with employers, was probably a little bit over a year ago in person, kind of tossing out some random questions like, if you could be any type of fruit, what would you be? Or just kind of some, or what was a novel or book that you read recently and tell me about it. And this is trying to get a little bit more at some not typical interview questions to see how you field those also. So I would say, in general, be prepared for different types of questions that you may be asked. The anxiety usually comes from thinking, what happens if I get asked a question that I have no idea how to answer, which may happen. And what I would say there for guidance is just be yourself. If you get asked a question that you don't know an answer to, it's okay to say, that's a great question. Can we come back to that a little bit later so I have a little bit of time to think? I've actually done that to myself. Not to myself. I've done that myself before. Fortunately, in that situation, they didn't ask me again, but I know that in interviews that I sit in now at the university, they will come back. They have to ask all the questions. So it really depends on the atmosphere, but know that if you're asked a question, you don't know the answer, it's okay to ask for some time, and just be honest. I think I'd like to think that most people, are trying to just see who are you? Let's learn about you and how do you handle certain situations. So especially if it's a real off the wall question, you can take time to think about it. Oftentimes the amount of what it feels like we're taking a long time thinking is usually not that long. So be yourself and do your preparation in that way. With your questions, make sure you're thinking about them. Something called the STAR method for answering questions, and I find that this can be a really helpful framework, especially for those behavioral interview questions. And STAR stands for situation or task, the action that you specifically took, and the results. And so I, over the years, as I have taught interviewing, I've sort of thought of students in one of two categories. There's tends to be students who, when they get nervous, talk a lot, maybe ramble, and you may see yourself like, oh yeah, that's me when I'm nervous. I may just really talk a lot. And then there's other types that I would say I fall under, which is when I get nervous, I tended to not talk much. And so this STAR method is a really good way to keep in check both these types of, when you're asked a behavioral interview question, like tell me about a time when you ran into a difficult problem and didn't know how to solve it. Your first thing would be to talk about the situation or the task of the problem solving that you ran into. The next would be to talk about the actions specifically that you took. So this is important, especially if you're in a team project. You want to talk about what did you do that made a result happen. And the result is just the outcome. And it doesn't always have to be, hey, I got an A, or it was perfect. It could also be, this didn't work. This particular way failed, but this is what I learned from that, and outlining that. And so if you're somebody who talks a lot when you are nervous, you want to make sure you're succinct in each of these categories. And if you're somebody who tends to be more brief, you want to make sure to stretch each of these out maybe a little bit longer than it would feel natural for you to do. But this STAR method is a really good way to make sure you're covering all of the aspects of an answer that are important. And the beauty of the results is once you talk about the results, you're done and you can just stop. So it gives you a good framework for that. 5 questions that you should make sure you're prepared for. The first one often being something like, tell me about yourself. That is something that you can practice beforehand. So often people are asking you really like, tell me about yourself as it relates to this particular position. So this is your opening answer. And this is something that I noticed that we're running a little bit short of time, but this would have been something I probably would have paired or had you work on your own to kind of give a tell me about yourself answer. But at this point, I will refer you to, you can absolutely practice this with a career coach. But this is just where you talk about why you're interested in the position, what skills it is that you bring, and some sort of opener. Some people like to make this more personal, like where you've come from, what are some of your passions. So you can approach this in whatever way feels best about you, but this is typically a first question that you'll be asked, and is one that you can prepare and think about specifically beforehand, so that very first question you're feeling confident about. You always want to be able to articulate why you're interested in the particular position that you're applying for, you're interviewing for. In case you're asked, which you may or may not be, what are some of your strengths and weaknesses? And then you always want to have thought beforehand about questions for them. So typically in this country, you will be asked at the end, what questions do you have for the employers? And this is really your chance to see, is this a good fit for you? And the type of questions that will help you. You don't want to ask questions you can kind of easily find from their website, but really think of some questions that are important for you to help evaluate if this will be a good position for you. Asking about company culture. You could even ask some subjective questions such as, what do you love about working for this organization? That'll tell you, or could tell you, quite a bit about that organization and that person. Going to skip that. Questions to ask employers can be around, job expectations. If you're curious what type of training you may get or have some concerns about that, what a typical day might be like for somebody in the position that you're applying for. if some people are really interested in knowing what type of advancement or professional growth, so those would be good questions to ask. More on the culture, if it's hierarchical or a flat organizational structure, this is where it really helps to know what's important to you. And you can brainstorm with a career coach about that too, to kind of see what is it that you might ask them, and what are some important aspects for you as you're considering who you'll report to also. All right, so that's interviewing. Boy, this time has gone by quick. I've been talking a lot. Any questions about interviewing? Situations you've run into before? Anything about interviewing that you're curious about that I'd be happy to try to answer? So as far as kind of job search techniques, like the actual searching for jobs, we have on the Career Center's homepage a link to Handshake, and I hope that each one of you has already become acquainted with this, but if not, there is a link on our homepage. This is the University of Oregon's main job and internship and experience database. You do need to go in and just activate your profile. It's a pretty simple step. Fill out some of the questions just about what some of your interests are, and you can go in and search for jobs and internships in this database. And a career coach would be happy to walk you in and show you around that database. This is one that I would absolutely encourage you to go in and look. These are people who are targeting University of Oregon students and have jobs locally, part-time jobs, national jobs. Sometimes there are even international jobs posted in here. But this is a good place to keep tabs on. You will also have access to this database for life. So even after your Duck ID changes, we can give you a separate login for that. But it's a really good place for networking, reaching out to potential employers. They have ways to connect with students who have worked for places or internships before that are part of this database, that you can reach out to them for sort of an inside scoop. So there's a lot of different layers in this tool. I could spend a whole hour going over this in particular, but I wanted to make sure that you knew about this. Networking, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with informational interviewing, but this is a tool to use for career research and networking, where you reach out to people who are doing jobs that you think you might like to do. LinkedIn is a great database to use for this. Again, coaches can walk you through this to reach out to alumni. Let's say you have a Baskin Robbins, you're thinking that maybe you'd like to work for them in their headquarters at some point, and that's a dream of yours, or working for Disney or some organization. You can do a search in LinkedIn to see what Duck alumni work for those organizations and reach out to them to potentially do an informational interview, which is just asking like, hey, what's it like to work for Disney, and how did you get that job, and do you have any strategies to help somebody who would like to one day work there? And so that's a way of networking. It's a way of tapping into what's called the hidden job market. So the place of how do you meet somebody who works somewhere and learn more about some specific strategies to build towards that. So networking is a huge job search strategy that I would like each one of you to learn more about, if specifically for your job search, which we can help with. And I briefly mentioned LinkedIn, but there's also job searching there too. Plus a lot of different strategies that we can talk to you about in one-on-one coaching if you reach out to us. So with that, I realize we have 1 minute left to go. There's a lot more I wanted to cover, but I do hope that some of these things have planted some seeds for you, or maybe given you a few new tools for your tool bag there. And with more than anything else, just to let you know that there are friendly people that are working at the Career Center that are here to help you. All you need to do is reach out to us for an appointment, and we can help you in wherever you're at. So I will open it up to questions, or if if we need to tie up, we can do that too. But that's the end of my particular part.
If I could, if I could ask one question really quick, Don.
Yeah.
So with COVID and impacting, either it has or has not sure exactly how, but has there been some sort of strategic change in how students address or create the resume or approach getting jobs during this, year and a half period? I mean, or is it just preparing for the Zoom interviews, or how would you say that COVID has impacted the job search process? I guess that's my question.
Yes, I'm happy to answer that, and I have lost everyone's face. I can't see anybody, but I'll just speak to my screen. I'm not still screen sharing, am I?
Yes.
I am. Okay, I'll stop. There we go. That does it. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So that's a great question. COVID absolutely has changed both the job landscape, the market. It has affected the market absolutely, especially when like last year and not knowing, as people were trying to navigate. I think we're kind of coming out of that a little bit. There are absolutely jobs that are available. I would say that it's a bit of a tougher job market now, but there's also this really cool thing happening where a lot of places by forced to have really increased the opportunities that are online, right? So if you think about, I saw someone's cat, that's cute. If you think about like opportunities that might have been restricted because of geography, we now, I think a big opportunity that's come from this is a lot of us are more versed with these online tools. And so doing things like informational interviewing with somebody in New York on Zoom is kind of second nature to most of us now, right? That particular way of communicating. So I would say that a lot of the job search techniques are similar. There might be, it's probably relying more heavily on doing networking strategies, although those were ones that we were, encouraging students to do beforehand. But as things are shifting, I see both more challenges, but also a lot more opportunity that's coming out of this too.
And as I mentioned before, we still have Pure Financial Coaching. You can visit our website to schedule an appointment and talk one-on-one with a PFC about all of those big five educations that we talked about, like earning, spending, borrowing, protecting, saving, and investing, and much more. So we'd love to chat with you more. And just stay connected with us. This is our website and our email, and you can follow us on social medias and even subscribe to our YouTube channel. So thank you all so much for coming, and we hope you enjoyed it.